Two exciting things happened in July. One of them was me discovering the best book of this year, and the other one was reaching 500 subscribers, which took me by surprise and happened when I was away. So I wasn't able to properly thank you all who are subscribing to my channel. I am truly honored and very grateful for this community. I had a grand plan that as soon as we hit 500 subscribers, I am going to do this giveaway. But like I said, I was away at the time. So we are now at, I believe, 560 subscribers. So I'm a little bit late, but I'm still doing the giveaway. So as a thank you, I would love to gift this gorgeous edition of Persuasion by Jane Austen to whoever is going to simply comment under this video to say you would love this book. If there is more than one of you wanting this book, then I will just randomly draw a name and then I will post to the lucky winner this gorgeous book. So this was a bit of a random find because I found this book in TK Maxx. I talked about TK Maxx in my other video. I do love TK Maxx, as you may know, and I never bought a book from them before. This was a first and I was going to keep it for myself, but I love it so much I think I should give it to one of you, and then I'll maybe try and find a second copy for myself. So this is by Cranford Collection. This is stunning. It has illustrations, opens really flat, but the best thing about it is the font. Look at these huge letters. The paper is nice and creamy, and do we have to say anything about this cover? This screams to me spring reading. Look at this. It's just gorgeous. Anyway, I have not come across Cranford Collection before, so I was pleasantly surprised. However, be careful about buying other books from this collection, because there were other books from this collection in TK Maxx and they were not the same. The font was smaller, the books weren't opening flat. This was the only one that was an absolute perfection. I didn't like the other ones. So on that basis, at the moment, I can only highly recommend Persuasion from Cranford Collection. And yes, all you have to do is just make a comment that you would like this book. And let's now jump immediately to talking about the best book of the year for me so far. And that is My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. I have talked about this book already in my mid-year tag. I devoured this book. This is so well written. There is no laggy middle. The flow is just perfect, and similar to what Ibsen does with some of his plays. This is very minimalistic in the sense that you only have 2 or 3 characters and majority of the book happens in one location, and yet this is packed with ambiguity, with suspense, with emotions. Daphne du Maurier really knows how to engage and baffle the reader. We follow this young, very much privileged English man who is developing an obsession about his cousin Rachel. But nothing is straightforward about this story, and the less you know, the better. I have gone into this experience completely blind, and I'm so happy that I did, because it was just the best reading experience. So apparently Daphne du Maurier wrote this book as a bit of a response to criticism she received after she wrote Rebecca, because the critics were saying in Rebecca the female character was written in a very passive way. Well, I can tell you, Rachel, the main female character in this book, has some serious agency. This is an excellent study of jealousy. It's also a story of a strong young woman who has survived many misfortunes. And also, it is a study of misogyny and privilege. And the study of misogyny and chauvinism in this book is delicately inserted. You just have to really pay attention to the dialogues. So cleverly done, and I love it when authors don't over explain things to me as a reader. In that sense, this book is perfection. Also, really complex characters. No one is 100% good or 100% bad. I highly recommend you read this book, especially if you don't know anything about it. Immediately after finishing this book, I did watch the movie with Rachel Weisz, which was really good. The book is better, there's no question. Ooh, I forgot to mention, I have read somewhere that The New Wife by J.P. Delaney is the modern retelling of My Cousin Rachel. I have read The New Wife, and actually it was my top psychological thriller I read last year. It does make sense. It is a different story, but still I can see the similarities. So yes, maybe after you finish this, if you do enjoy psychological thrillers, you might want to pick up The New Wife. Okay, now let's go back to talking about books in chronological order as I've read them. So actually the very first book I read in July was this one, After Leaving Mr. McKenzie by Jean Rhys, and this is probably her lesser known book. She only became widely known after writing her White Sargasso Sea many years after she wrote this book, but I think this is an excellent book. So we follow here Julia, who is 36 years old. She currently lives in Paris, and throughout her life, as we get to know her, we get to understand that she relied on her looks to help her sustain her standards of living. This is, by the way, set in 1931, and this is definitely literary fiction in a sense that there really isn't that much plot. This is more of a study. Yes, there is a series of certain events, but throughout the book you feel like Julia is on the edge of some kind of major realization, but that doesn't actually quite happen. This is a really sad book. As you read it, there is a true sense of insecurity because of the way all the control that really matters belongs to men, and also everything feels very transient because Julia doesn't really have a home, and so she's staying in these various hotels. There are also two locations in this book, Paris and London. I think Jean Rhys didn't really like London because London in here is very, very gloomy. Julia, the main character, makes some reckless, it seems, decisions. It feels as if she's at some kind of tipping point. Everything feels a little bit out of step. It's so hard to describe this book, but one thing I really liked about it is that the way the author describes Julia and her various decisions is in a very unapologetic way, as if the author was saying to us, okay, well, you not necessarily supposed to like her, but this is what life is about. And even the way the relationship between Julia and her sister is described, it is brutally honest. This is a great study of isolation and lack of belonging. I will definitely read White Sargasso Sea, but not until after I have read Jane Eyre, which I'm hoping to do soon. The next book I read, another random library find, was Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. I read it in the middle of the summer, even though this book is set in the winter, and despite that, I really liked it. I have talked about this book already because it was included in my reading vlog, so I won't spend too much time on it. I will link my reading vlog above. If you haven't read this American modern classic yet, please go into it without checking it out too much because you don't want to come across any spoilers. This is definitely a tragedy. The one thing I haven't talked about in my vlog is about how I thought the nature was so well described, in the sense that it really reflected the atmosphere in this book, which is quite gloomy. And if I was asked about the main theme of this book, it would be determinism. This is the question that I have come across in other classics I have read this year. For example, in Effie Briest by Theodor Fontane, a German classic, where the writers are putting a question to us around how much control we have over our lives, really, and how much is determined by our circumstances. Very short novella, just 113 pages. You can probably read it in a day, and this book is written in a language that doesn't require much effort. It is a really easy classic to read. So again, I highly recommend this, especially to those of you who are maybe European viewers, because we are not necessarily exposed to American classics as much as we are to European classics, especially when it comes to books that we are made to read at school. The next book I finished in July is Long Bright River by Liz Moore. I loved this book and I loved the writing by Liz Moore. I have already immediately reserved in my local library The God of the Woods, which is her most recent book, which people seem to love as well. This one is set in Philadelphia. We follow Mikey, this female detective who is trying to solve a crime. She's also a single mother. This is one of those books where the crime itself and solving it becomes a backstory, and backstory becomes the front story, because really what this is study of characters, study of family and addiction. There are also some really intelligently presented ideas on misogyny within the police force, but like I said, mainly this is beautiful analysis of a family bond, and the characters in here are very complicated and they definitely feel very real. Still Life by Sarah Widman is the next book I finished in July. Again, I talked about this in my reading vlog as well, but I was only in the beginning of this book, and now that I have finished it, I have slightly mixed feelings about it. So I had trouble getting into it because you just introduced to quite a few random, it seems, characters and several locations right at the start. But then after 100 pages or so, it does start to make sense. There's a certain tenderness to the style of writing presented in here, despite it being quite punchy, because you have a lot of these short sentences. There are no quotation marks, by the way, in this book, which after 400 pages does get a little bit not annoying but tiring. The characters are very vivid, they are comical in a heartwarming way. The majority of the plot is set in Florence, and honestly, if after you've read this book you are not booking your ticket to Florence, then you never will. So we follow Ulysses, who is an English soldier. The book starts in 1944, so towards end of WW2. Due to various happenings, he ends up living in Florence. This book spans decades. I think it goes till late 70s, and you have some real historical facts included in this book. For example, the flood of Florence in 1966, also English football team winning the World Cup. If you enjoy that sort of thing, you will definitely enjoy this book. I overall loved the story. I loved the characters, although I was disappointed that Ulysses' story wasn't really developed and it kind of went nowhere, which it might not bother some of you because there are other characters who were well developed, including Evelyn, the main female character. She gets a really nice closure at the end of the book when we circle back to 1901, but Ulysses Francis was to me the main character of this novel, so I was disappointed that his story just didn't go anywhere, and to me that was a little bit of a missed opportunity. But overall, this is definitely a feel-good book. I would say it's all about vibes and atmosphere and love of Florence, of course, more so than maybe an excellent plot. And finally, let's talk about the last book I read in July. I read this when I was in France with my husband. This year we treated ourselves because it was the last year when both of our kids went to Scouts camp together at the same time, which meant we were able to have a short break, and it was lovely. I will do a short video on that at some point because I did take some footage. But I wanted to read, while in France, a book written by a French author, and so I picked this non-fiction book by Annie Ernaux, very well established, very well respected contemporary female writer in France, and the book is titled The Years. This is the most difficult book to talk about today because it is unlike any other book I have read. So let me try to explain this to you. This is a type of memoir that spans decades, starting from 1941 right up to 2001. But it's not a memoir like we know it, because it is not just an intimate account of one woman's life over those decades, but almost like a collective prose slash biography about all of us as human beings who strive for meaning that more often than not continues to evade us. So if we think about this period from 1941 to 2001, actually sorry, I think it's up until 2006, a lot has happened, not just in France, and actually some of the French events described in this book I wasn't aware of, so this was a great education in that sense. But you don't have to necessarily know about these events to enjoy this book, because there are also lots of other events that are described that took place in a wider world. For example, the Second World War, the Vietnam War, the September 11 attacks. The writing in here is short with very intense paragraphs that almost make you feel like you're on this a bit of a roller coaster ride. The language in this book is stunning. I don't think I have ever had this many tabs. By the way, these are just the regular post-it notes because as we were boarding the Eurostar train to go to Paris, I realized I didn't take my regular little tabs. So I was desperately searching shops for some basic post-it notes. And so that's all I had. And as luck would have it, there were a lot of pages to mark. So yes, the language is absolutely stunning. And I think this was the first book I have ever read where I could really sense that the excellent translation in here played a huge part in me enjoying this book. I think the translator had a really difficult task to hand because, like I said, you can sense the writing is just absolutely exquisite. The translator for this edition was, by the way, Alison L. Strayer. This is Fitzcarraldo Editions, by the way. First Fitzcarraldo Editions book that I had a chance to properly hold in my hand and appreciate. I love it. Isn't it just stunning? Plain, basic colors, and look at these margins. Massive. Let me read you a couple of quotes, just so you get the flavor of the writing in here. So on page 210, she is talking about a period of time in France after the introduction of digital cameras. This is how she describes it. We dwelled in the infinite present. We never stopped wanting to click on save and keep all the photos and films viewable on the spot. They were transferred and filed in seldom opened folders on the computer. What mattered most was the taking of the photos, existence captured and duplicated, the complete conservation of life. With digital technology, we drained reality dry. Stunning, isn't it? And one more piece for you. This is about getting married. Because summers had started to resemble each other and caring only for oneself was more and more of a drag, because youth had come to feel like a vague and cheerless time whose end we could not see. And because we'd noted the social superiority of couples over singles, we fell in love more purposefully and found ourselves married and soon to be parents. There's something of deep truths in her writing that she somehow manages to capture in the most accurate language. The book is probably not for everyone. Do you know what? I think if you're the sort of person who enjoyed Deborah Levy's living biography, which I have talked about on my channel, then you will definitely enjoy this book as well. If you have a bit of an appetite for something completely different that is stunningly written, then I highly recommend this, and I will probably be reaching for other works by Annie Ernaux. And it is from the same book. I nominated the word of the month. You know my love for English language, and I'm always very excited when I learn a new word that I haven't heard yet. So here, when Annie Ernaux is describing Paris, she says it was the ineluctable trajectory of a successful life, the full attainment of modernity. And it is that word ineluctable that I have never heard before. So I looked it up, and it means unable to be resisted or avoided, inescapable. And the example that the Oxford Dictionary gives us is the ineluctable facts of history. Just as it is ineluctable that this video needs to come to an end. On that note, thank you very much for watching. Again, thank you to all of you who subscribe and watch my videos. Don't forget to comment if you would like the book I mentioned in the beginning of this video, and I'll see you as always next week.